Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Jen Leahy, and I am the Deputy Director for Learning and Engagement here at the Columbus Museum of Art. And we are so thrilled to partner with our wonderful friends, Ballet Met, for this, our final Wednesdays at 2 of this season. So when we saw this exhibition, Marie Laurencin, Sapphic Paris, we knew we had to reach out to Ballet Met, just such a gem in town, to get some perspectives on particularly the works in the exhibition that are a really beautiful collaboration between Marie Laurencin and ballet, which is, of course, a really rich history, which we are thrilled and privileged to hear more about today. So just a quick word, this is the final week of the exhibitions, so please do, of the special exhibitions. We will have some more in September, which we hope you'll come back for, but please do take some time to get your final explorations of those shows in. So, without further ado, I will introduce our special speaker today, Dr. Maria Torrija, extremely international, so her bio will be testing all of my accents. The Academy Director of Ballet Met was born in Madrid, Spain. Dr. Torrija began her ballet studies with Lola de Avila, Luis Fuentes, and Carmen Roche. At the age of 13, she was awarded a Fulbright scholarship to study for 3 years at the School of American Ballet in New York. After a short stint with the Ballet Nacional de España Clásico, she began her 20-year career as a dancer with the Deutsche Opera Berlin Ballet Company, currently the Staatsballet Berlin. See, I told you. During her time in Berlin, Maria performed in solo and principal roles in numerous classical ballets, including works choreographed by George Laurencin, Maurice Béjart, George Neumeier, William Forsythe, John Cranko, Ire Killian, and Kenneth Macmillan, among others. She holds a bachelor's degree in ballet teaching and graduated summa cum laude with a master's and PhD in performing arts from the Universidad Rey Juan Carlos in Madrid. She also has an extensive teaching resume. Beginning with the Opera Ballet of Deutsche Opera Berlin, she has served as a faculty member at the Palluca Hochschule für Tanz in Dresden. Maria has participated in seminars and has been invited to teach classes throughout Europe, Japan, and Hong Kong, as well as, of course, the United States. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Maria Torrija.
Good afternoon. I'm very pleased, I'm very happy to be here to give this talk about ballet and art. Because one part of my life and my career was researching on the impact the arts, the visual arts and music had on dance. So I am very happy now that I can talk about it. Do some of you have heard of the company Les Ballets Russes? Of course, we know about Marie Laurencin because we have the exhibition here, which she was a female painter from the beginning of the 20th century and impacted the arts with her painting, and it was critical, very important for female painters. Also, do you know a little bit about ballet? Good. Okay, so then, now I'm gonna start to talk. So this is mainly focused on this exhibition. And one of the parts of the exhibition that we can see is the collaboration Marie Laurencin had in a very impactful ballet performed by Les Ballets Russes. I will talk about Ballets Russes and everything throughout the speech I'm gonna give, but anyway, so this ballet was premiered in 1924. It's called Les Biches. Les Biches means the does, the female deers. The meaning in French is the darlings, the flirtation women. The music was composed by a very important composer of the time, still very important composer, Francis Poulenc, French composer. The choreography by the first female choreographer, Bronislava Nijinská. And the libretto by the famous poet and writer Jean Cocteau, French poet and writer. So we have here an example of a big collaboration in the arts, which is this ballet, Les Biches, which was performed at this time. Now I'm going to move on into the next. Hopefully I get it right, yes. So this ballet was commissioned, as you can see, by Serge Diaghilev, which was the impresario, the founder, the director of that amazing company that I will talk about later, which was Les Ballets Russes. It is important and it's impactful because it's an art collaboration, which is very difficult to have. It's wonderful, it should happen, but it's hard. That so many different artists from so different fields get together and create a piece of art. It is important in dance because of the music is composed, the composition is neoclassical. In music means going back to the way of composing maybe from Bach, going away from the romantic, meaning end of the 19th century compositions, music scores from Tchaikovsky and all those musicians. So Poulenc, which was experimental in many of his compositions, went back to neoclassical, back to the classical idea in music. And in ballet, is one of the first, is a pre-neoclassical ballet. Neoclassical ballet in dance means going back to the classical vocabulary, meaning the classical steps. Ballet is codified. It has steps that you learn throughout the years. They're movements called steps that we learn. And those movements, there's a huge vocabulary for it that we put together, and with that we create the ballet movement. It's based on the rotation turnout of the legs. So it's very specific. It is a very radical art form. So in dance, like in the arts, there's always moments where we reject academia. In classical dance means the classical vocabulary, the classical structure, the structure how a ballet is done. By that time, in the beginning of the 20th century, that was happening. So Nijinská, the choreographer, goes back to those classical steps, but modifies them, making the movement bigger, faster, taking more risk. Cutting the choreography is different. It's not the lines of 32 women. The movement is more about the movement. It is also neoclassical because neoclassicism in dance doesn't have a plot. They're ballets without a plot. They're about a theme, an impression, but there's no storyline in it. So that's why it's very important. But what is, I think, great is the collaboration of two women, which are Nijinská and Marie Laurencin, which is extremely progressive for the time, because it's 1924. And Laurencin, like in many ballets of Ballets Russes, influenced this work of art so much with her ideas and her designs that that's why the choreography was neoclassical. The impact of Laurencin in Nijinská was great. was really big. So that's why the ballet became like this, because Nijinsky had done other works that were maybe not neoclassical. So this is very important in that time. And of course, two women working together is great. So now I'm gonna go a little bit into the ballet itself. So, Les Biches, the theme is an ambiance, an atmosphere. The main idea of Diaghilev and the librettist Jean Cocteau was to recreate the flirtatious moments so typical of the 18th century. It also means the endless childhood, so being playful. It is about flirting. It has 26 dancers, mainly women, 3 men. The men are athletes. The women want to flirt. There is the hostess, which she hosts in her living room this party. And the sets of Marie Laurencin are very important, the sets and the costume. The sets are like, the place is white, but in the middle, it is a blue sofa. No match. And then her costumes. Her costumes are like very light skirts, which for the time was very rare. Very light dresses and skirts. You can see in the exhibition, they're there. The color is very typical color of Marie Laurencin, that kind of blue-grayish that she has in her paintings. So what is important is that how Nijinsky used these sets and costumes. The costumes were light for the dancers to dance, so they could move. The bigger the costume is, the more material, the more you carry, the less you can move. So that's why the ballet became neoclassical. That's why the movement could become more evolved, more than it normally is. The sofa, very important because it's impactful to open the stage and you have that blue sofa. But the Nijinsky made a huge big role of that sofa. The sofa turns around while they're dancing. The dancers jump on their sofa. There's a lot going on with that sofa, which is very, very entertaining. But also what is important is that it's a ballet about women, created by women, because the majority of them are women. And it's a very progressive ballet for the time. One of the, you can see in the exhibition, one of the roles is called La Garçon, which is a female dancer dressed in boys' costumes, which is ambiguous what gender this role has, which in a way is way far ahead of where society would move. So it's to women, those thoughts. And of course, it's one of the first neoclassical ballets. There's many different personalities of women in that ballet. The men are more or less athletes, but you see a lot of different personalities of women. It's a short ballet. It's not long, and it's a ballet that unfortunately is being forgotten or is being performed but not so often, like every 10 years, every 20 years, some companies will perform it as a retrospective to Ballet Russe and to honor Bronislava Nijinsky. The music of Poulenc is also very interesting. It has singing, and it's actually not easy to dance to that music. So kudos on Nijinsky and the dancers, and on on Poulenc to challenge dance that way, because it's always a work together. It's always a work of different art forms. So, as I said, it's a neoclassical ballet. It has no story. It's about a theme, an ambiance. It happens in around half an hour. I've seen it. I don't remember how long, but that's more or less. And then it's fascinating. Technically, for the dancer, it's not easy. And of course, with the whole going on with the sofa, it's not easy either. So it was great that Marie Laurencin and Nijinská got to work together in this. So now I move on here. We're going to talk about Bronislava Nijinská. Bronislava Nijinská was born in, let me see, 91 in Russia, in Minsk, and passed away here in the United States, 1972, in California. She comes from a family of artists. Her brother is the famous male dancer Václav Nijinsky. She went to join the Imperial Ballet School, which is now called the Vaganova School in St. Petersburg, Russia, and joined the Imperial Ballet, which is now called the Mariinsky Ballet, in St. Petersburg in 1908. In 1909, she joined, that was the year it was founded, Ballet Russe. She was a very young dancer still, as a dancer, and went on tour, because that was a touring company, went on tour to France with that company. She had her moments where she danced at Ballet Russe, then she left. She went back to Russia. There was the Russian Revolution, and her work is being very impacted by the arts of the beginning of the 20th century, which there were a lot of art movements, but especially that we are going to see in one of the ballets by the Russian constructivist movement, which was a movement that happened right after the Russian Revolution, which it was about to reconstruct Russia. So in theater, it was all about factories, machineries, or even in the pictures, paintings, it was machineries. It was about reconstruct, let's construct houses, let's construct cars, whatever. So they use all those forms in theater to put theater there. So ballet took it. But instead of using sets, they use humans. And that's when it's been said that ballet becomes an architectonic art form, because you can build with bodies, because you can create a pyramid, because you can create shapes with a group of dancers. So she was very influenced by that. And also, of course, by neoclassicism, which we see it in music, but you had in Russia a very important, neoclassicism in Russia is very important, because there was a movement of writers called the Acme is Poist, which I think in the Russian symbolism, they got a lot of the Dionysius idea, the god Dionysus. And they reject that, and they want to go to the Apollo. Apollo is clarity and order. Dionysus is more chaos, party, orgies. So that was one of the big conflicts in art in the beginning of the 20th century. She belongs to those artists of that time that believed that way and implemented that in her works. That's why it was easy for her to connect with Marie Laurencin and her sets. Simple, not expressionist. I will talk about that in another ballet. So that helped her to go into the constructivist in ballet and the neoclassicism. Is the first female choreographer, the only choreographer that Ballet Russe had. For me, she's the first female choreographer in ballet. There was a famous ballerina, Marie Taglioni, which she did a little choreography back in the 19th century for one of her students, but a really big ballet is her. Unfortunately, we don't talk about Nijinská, hardly ever. It's a pity because she had a big impact in this art form. Companies had brought her work back, and there's been a lot of studies about her. And of course, she moved later, once she left Ballet Russe, to the United States. And she had her own ballet school, and she restaged some of her ballets for big companies until she passed away. So that is Nijinská. For you, in order to understand, I'm going to be very short about this, what I'm talking about. So ballet starts. Dance, humans will have always danced to celebrate, to express our feelings. But ballet starts to become what it is in the Renaissance, in the courts of the kings and queens, European kings and queens. It evolves that way. It's always part of a celebration. So they have a celebration, they have like a big gathering, and they're dancers dancing. One king, Louis XIV, loves to dance, is a dancer himself, and decides to make ballet a profession. And in 1961, he founds the Académie Royale de la Musique et de la Danse, which still exists in ballet. It's called now the School of the Paris Opera Ballet, so that's the oldest school. At that time, the steps get codified. The position of the feet, we have 5 positions of the feet, get codified. The movements, called steps, get names, and people start to learn them. They have to go to school. People live from dance, so ballet becomes a profession as a performing art. So in the arts, ballet is like the younger sister of the arts, because all of the other arts had professions: sculpture, painting, already by the Greeks and the Romans, music, but we come so late. So in a way, we were always a little bit behind. Back then, dance was performed mainly by men. It was not well seen that a woman would dance. So throughout centuries, men were the main roles. There were very few women. And then dance in the 18th century, around the time of the French Revolution, finally becomes an independent art form. So we don't perform just in operas and celebrations. We have our own performance. For that, they implemented the mime, the gestures that in the old ballets they use with the hands to tell the story to the audience. Those pieces, those ballets were just about the story. So then becomes an independent art form. Later, we go into the 19th century through the arts, because the arts are always in society what makes dance evolve. We move into the Romanticism. The sets and the stories of the Romantic, the paintings of the Romantic, in graveyards, in forests at night, in lands that back then they thought they were exotic. The impossible love, all that becomes the main theme of the ballets. And it's then the female dancer who can recreate maybe an ethereal being that was part of those legends, so typical of the Romanticism, because of the fragile look, that becomes then the main, carries the ballet, the main person. And in order to create that ethereal being, they put the female dancer on point, because we needed to give the impression we were floating. Then society evolved, and then the big skirts women were carrying in the 18th century get shortened, and as we see there in the first romantic ballet, 1832, La Sylphide, the romantic tutu, with layers of chiffon, and then the dancer doesn't have so much weight to dance. The female body is usually very flexible. So through the ballerina having those light costumes, again, the movement, the more layers of material we cut, the easier it is to move. So the movement evolves. And the main themes become about women. So in a way, we'll see that society in the Western civilization is moving towards the women's movement, like in literature, because there were books written about women, Madame Bovary, Anna Karenina, Eugénie Grandet, the operas, La Gioconda, Aida, in ballet, Giselle, La Bayadère, La Sylphide, La Viviandière, those are all women. And that evolves from France, it moves to Russia. A French choreographer says, okay, let's create big ballets, so 4 or 5 acts ballets, but what is important is that in Russia, a symphonic musician joins and collaborates with ballet and composes music in a bigger scale, because before that, ballets were composed how dancers felt comfortable with. It's the moment the music becomes more complex and richer where the movement evolves. And that's when the most important collaboration is the Sleeping Beauty, which is a ballet that is called the higher point of classicism in dance, where you saw the classical technique, that classical vocabulary, is a retrospective to the France of Louis XIV. But we are presenting a woman of the end of the 19th century, which is very progressive. They're giving her gifts to the princess, that in the tale, this is a tale of Charles Perrault, don't give her, they give her wisdom, they give her courage, they give her generosity, which are very important for humans to have. So we already see a powerful princess there. And from there, you can see this picture. This is the end, they call the apotheosis, the end of the ballet, which is, actually that music, this is a parenthesis, is the hymn of a French king, Henry IV, the last Valois. And because it's a retrospective to France, it's a lot of political issues here going on, because Russia is already 27 years later, is going to have the Russian Revolution. So they're trying to say how great monarchy is. So they bring back, you see, at the very top, the god Apollo with the chariot and the 4 horses. And this Apollo here has a great meaning in dance, because it's the god of the art, of dance, because the philosophy of classical ballet is based on the Apollonian ideas, which are order and clarity. So it's very important for us dancers, the meaning of this. And you'll see later also what happens with this. So anyway, again a parenthesis, Ballet Met, we are lucky in Columbus that Ballet Met is going to be performing Sleeping Beauty. So I please ask you to come and join us, because it's as I say, it's a ballet that maybe we don't know so much about, but it's a ballet. The ballet gave the princess a name. In the tale, she doesn't have a name. It's the ballet. It was Petipa, Tchaikovsky, and Sevoslowsky, which was the librettist. They gave this princess a name, Aurora. So everything you see in the Walt Disney film, a lot of it is taken from the ballet. So the ballet was first. So that's where you see this is the higher point of classicism in dance, the Sleeping Beauty. The next one, we have here what happens after, which that's bringing us to what we have now, which is the beginning of the 20th century in the arts. We have all the isms breaking the rules. Cubism, Futurism, Naturalism, Primitivism, Dadaism. Well, that influences ballet. So we have Sleeping Beauty, and then the next generation rejects Sleeping Beauty. They want to cut with it. They question everything, what ballet is, which is a threat always when artists do that to academia. But then from that, academia grows again and evolves. And it comes to a new dimension. So we have an American dancer, Isadora Duncan, the first one. She went to Russia. She was a woman. And went to Russia to perform Isadora Duncan, which is one of the mothers of modern dance. She's very important in ballet because she danced to musics that were not composed just for ballet. She took music from Beethoven, she took music from Chopin. She was dancing with scarves. She took away the corsets, was dancing barefoot. It was a shock for everybody. But many of those choreographers and artists were fascinated by her freedom. So they started experimenting with it. They took away the old mime that I talked about before, and they brought natural gesture to ballet through also ideas of other Russian artists. All this happened in Russia, because the story of ballet is the story of countries. We go from France to Russia, also to Denmark, but mainly to Russia. And the last stop of this history of dance is the United States of America. But anyway, I'll go later there. So you see, they started to create the whole avant-garde movement influence. We wanted to experiment those ideas that artists had with movement, which it was difficult the moment you take codification away. And suddenly you are in front of an abysm of possibilities. But they were trying new forms of ballet, and they called it the new ballet. The main person that had that idea, the main artist, was called Michel Fokine. And you see here, is the Dying Swan. It's a famous solo for a ballerina, choreographed for Anna Pavlova, which is very symbolic in dance, because in a way, he's killing, it sounds very hard what I'm saying, the symbol of ballet, which is the swan. So the next one, now we're going to Ballet Russe, is simultaneously we have a very important person in the arts, which is Serge Diaghilev. Serge Diaghilev was a curator of the arts. He was very connected to an artistic movement, the Russian symbolist movement, and founded a magazine called the Mir Iskustva, which is the world of art, where many symbolist artists were part of it. They did exhibitions, they wrote. You see some of them are Leon Basque, Alexandre Benoit, Nicolas Rodig. And from there, from these people, they decided to create and found, because Diaghilev loved ballet, the Ballet Russe. So here we have Ballet Russe. Ballet Russe was the idea, this is the first word is in German, it's called Gesamtkunstwerk, all the arts together. There's an idea from Richard Wagner, the German composer, and it's all the arts together collaborating. Unfortunately, there's always one art form that is going to be showcased more. So it doesn't really work. And you see, this is some, very few, of the many artists that were part of this. Leon Basque, Michel Fouquin, Igor Stravinsky, Debussy, Picasso, Laurencin, Goncharova, Derain, Coco Chanel, they were all part of Ballet Russe. It's been the most important and impactful arts enterprise in the history of the Western civilization, I think, of the world. Works and ideas that were created then have not been done before, and I think hardly ever after. The main idea was to bring Russian ballet to France and show Russian culture to the French. And from that, it evolved. In the first seasons, it started in 1909. It was mainly about Russian themes. But then later, after the First World War, they started to include a lot of ideas and artists, French artists mainly, into those works. And it was mainly, we all work together, all the arts together. Here we have what it brought, Ballet Russe, revolutionized the 20th century arts, continue still to influence cultural activity today. It claims a unique position in the history of the performing arts. What brought back the dancer, because of the male dancer, because as I said before, the women took over in the 19th century. So through Ballet Russe, we take back the man, which was mainly in the beginning Václav Nijinsky, Serge Liffard, Anton Dolin. The first female choreographer was in Ballet Russe, Bronislava Nijinsky. He was a pioneer on the triple bills, which are short ballets, which Ballet Met does those triple bills. And we have next year one very interesting one that is at the end of the last one in our season. It showcased Black choreographers. It's called Black Voices. Very, very wonderful contemporary choreographers. And I'm very excited to see it. So anyway, the idea of the triple bills comes from Ballet Russe. So shorter ballets. All the most influential artists worked for Ballet Russe. It changed the path of ballet because Ballet Russe at some point, it became so much about the set and costumes that dancers couldn't move, that there was not so much choreography. And then dancers, through that, found a new way to put ballet and express themselves. I'll talk about it in a second. The first neoclassical ballets were created there, and as I said, it's the most influential one. Here we have Nijinsky with Margot Fonteyn when she did the revival of Les Noces, Marie Laurencin, Václav Nijinsky, and of course down there, George Balanchine and Igor Stravinsky. So, what impact it had? We call classicism in dance, we spoke about it, Sleeping Beauty, Ballet Russe, breaking the rules. This is a picture of Nijinsky, The Rite of Spring. So you see the movements are parallel, two-dimensional, totally different, a lot of costume. And it leads to neoclassicism, which is the big next step in dance, which is actually the turning point of neoclassical, where it really starts is in 1928 with the ballet Apollo, which is about the god Apollo. So we go back to Apollo. In Sleeping Beauty, we saw that picture. We have it there with the god Apollo. That's Apollo, that's the sun. The legs of those ballerinas are the sun, and that's him, the god. And the ballerinas are the arts, some of the arts, which is one of them, the main one, is terpsichore, the muse of dance. So what is neoclassicism? No, I say it again, no story, just about the movement, about the theme. And the main part is what they were looking for it was dance expresses itself, which that comes from Stravinsky when he said music expresses itself. So we express ourselves through movement. We don't need, that was the idea, very radical, ballet is very radical. We don't need a story. We don't need sets. We don't need big costumes. We can even express ourselves with a leotard and tights. So then ballet finally doesn't need anything, just the music and the space to really express itself. And it's done starting in 1928. Of course, with neoclassical, classical technique, but with movements of jazz, experimenting how far the human body can go with a movement. And of course, all the arts had influence dance, the classical idea. The pillar or the column of that classical temple is like a classical line in ballet. Here, the abstract art also. You see? The four temperaments, very clear, just the line. Expressionist art in Prodigal Son and the Romantic in ballet. And there's many, many more that we have tried. And in modern dance, there's a lot. But there's another speech for another time. So the arts had always influenced us. We have always, a little bit behind, we have always tried to follow the trends of the visual artist. So now I'm going to talk about some collaborations. This is going to be my end, which are very important. This is the Ballet Les Sylphides, was created in 1907 for the Mariinsky by Michel Fokine, designed from the symbolist Alexandre Benoit. Costumes, those are all the friends of Sergei Diaghilev from the World of Art magazine. Costumes from Leon Basque, the music Chopin Glazunov. It was performed in the first season of Ballet Russe in 1909. It goes back to the Romantic ballet, as you can see there. And in ballet, we say it's an impressionist ballet, which Romantic and impressionist is kind of strange, but we are always a little bit different because the picture that it creates, the forms that the choreography creates, could remind you of an impressionist picture, because suddenly in a corner you have something that projects you like in an impressionist picture. So we call it an impressionist ballet, the only impressionist ballet we have. This one is Firebird. It's mainly also Ballet Russe, a big collaboration, again Fokine, music from Stravinsky, very Russian ballet. Golovin and Leon Basque, 1910. You see the rich costuming, beautiful. The Firebird is the one that dances the most. We are getting already to sets and costumes to match, so it's an exhibition of these wonderful paintings, costume, and scenery. But it's about Russia. It's about a story, a Russian tale. The next one. This is my favorite, The Rite of Spring. 1913, music from Stravinsky, the choreography for Václav Nijinsky. Like his sister, Forgotten, a very innovative choreographer. He really broke the rules. You see the dancers turned in positions, the costuming. It is totally different. He was a ballet dancer, but he wanted to experiment. It is primitivism, and it's about Russian Slavic primitive folks. The music and the ballet was such a visual shock in 1913 that there was this huge riot in Paris by the premiere where people were hitting each other. They even pulled out the seats off the floor because of the visual shock they had. Nijinsky had the dancers, as you see, turned in. He created circles, ignoring, giving the back to the audience with something that in ballet was never seen. Everything was so different that they did a few performances more, and that was it. It was revived again in the 1980s for the Joffrey Ballet. I have performed it myself when we did it back in the 90s, and it's very interesting. I've done different versions of the Rite of Spring, but this one, you can see the connection to the music and the theme. So, and it still shocks audiences when they see it. It's very rare that we will see the original version anymore. The next one is Parade. This is the biggest showcase of collaboration, the collaboration of artists, which in this case is still during the First World War, and is Picasso, the music from Satie, which he was doing experimental music then. The libretto is Jean Cocteau, like in Les Biches. And you see Cubism and Futurism. So you see all these amazing sets from Picasso. We can see it's Picasso. And there's a blend of Futurism in the choreography, trying to move very fast. Now, there's not much dancing in it. It's more about the sets and costumes. It's about a circus. And yeah, it's very interesting to see how ballet was there. Here we have Lenos, which is from Bronislava Nijinská. And there you see what I meant before with the constructivism. You see the shapes, how dance can be architectonic, how you can build with bodies. It's the music from Stravinsky. The costumes and shades are from Goncharova. And this is the first time in Ballet Russe that the choreographer sets the tone. Nijinská wanted the costumes this way, and Goncharova was so fascinated by, this is the first time two women, by the way, worked together, Natalia Goncharova and Nijinská, that she was fascinated and she created the costumes how Nijinská wanted. This is about a Russian peasant wedding, Lenos. It's a very deep theme, very interesting ballet, where the families and the bride and the groom, they have both no decision in their destiny. So it's a very important ballet, and as you can see, it's influenced by constructivist ballet. So another very impactful work of art. And the last one that I want to show here is the Prodigal, no, I have one more, but the last one with Ballet Russe, Prodigal Son, which is by George Balanchine. A year before, Balanchine created Apollo. But Apollo, it was more the collaboration with Stravinsky and Balanchine. Not so much sets and costumes, because it's about less is more. It's about more the movement. It's the first neoclassical ballet. Now here, a year later, we have a neoclassicist choreographing an expressionist ballet, which is from Rouault, which was an expressionist. And you can see the sets are very much like the expressionist painters from back then. And the ballet itself is very expressionist. It's not very typical what the choreography of George Balanchine normally is. The music is from Prokofiev. So again, you can see how the arts influence a neoclassical, which is Balanchine, and how he then adapted to this. This is the story of the Bible, the prodigal son. And then the last one, this is much, much later. And I chose this one because it's very important. It's the Four Temperaments. The Four Temperaments was choreographed in 1946 for Ballet Society, which is what it became later, New York City Ballet. Originally, the sets and costumes were for Kurt Seligman. You can see the black and white. You see what the original costumes were. And the music was by Paul Hindemith, a very important composer of the 20th century, commissioned by George Balanchine. So they got together and created the ballet. And then Balanchine saw the costumes, and he didn't like them. So, which a lot of the movements make sense with those costumes. So again, you see the influence of the arts. But he was in the idea, Balanchine, very neoclassical, art expresses itself. We need to see the dance. This is about the dance. So the opening night, he went with scissors to the changing room and started to cut the costumes of those dancers. And then Kurt Seligman was like, well, we cannot see Seligman in this. And he said, well, we cannot see Balanchine, and we cannot see Mary Ellen and Tanaki Leclerc, all those ballerinas of the time. So he cut the costumes. I guess they had a big fight. And later, a year later, we go into the first ballet that is being produced or done with practice clothes, which is leotard and tights, and for the men, the tights and the t-shirt, which is the Four Temperaments. With this, created a whole line of ballets, which were called the black and white ballets. And later in dance, you can see in the more contemporary neoclassical dance, neoclassical still wears the tutu, but a lot of the contemporary dance is about the dancer being as free as possible to be able to move and showcase the athleticism of dance of nowadays, because dance has evolved in a very athletic way, very expressive, but very extreme physically, because ballet is very human, and we humans always want more. We were walking on four, and then we rose up and walked in two. We wanted to fly, we found a way to fly. We always want more. In the Olympics, we always want more. Ballet always tries more. So, that's it.
I love this. I could listen to you give me history of ballet all day. I'm just completely wrapped. We have time for a couple of questions. What questions do you have? Yes.
The Columbus Library System has an excellent book called After the Romanovs. I don't know if anyone has read it, but it deals with a lot of the Russian nobility, even before the Russian Revolution. Paris was a big playground. They were there in the 1880s, 1890s. And one of my questions was, the Ballet Russe ballets, they were great, they were like the greatest show on earth, and they lost money year after year. So my question is, did the short ballet that Marie Laurencin did I think she did some of the backdrops and she did the costumes, did that lose money too?
I don't think that's I don't know that. I know they lost ballet because the productions were very, very expensive. Because in order to create those sets and costumes, it was very, very expensive. That's why Ballet Russe, I mean, I think as long as Diaghilev would have been alive, he would have kept it going. The problem is that he passed away in 1929. So, because he could always find people to sponsor.
I think Nicholas II, they were getting patrons, like every year they get a new patron, you know, because they needed fresh money. And Nicholas II's, I believe it was his great uncle. He was a Grand Duke of something. He actually was, in his own right, very good with not just raising money, because he used sovereign funds, but he had a lot of good artistic ideas, and I don't know how he influenced Ballet Russe, but there were some Russians that, you know, they had other people's money, so to speak, that they could, you know, prop things up with.
Yeah, I think in the beginning, a lot of the funding came from Russian. I think the revolution and the First World War really impacted Ballet Russe. So, but as I said, Diaghilev, once he moved away from Russia after the revolution and was based in France, had ways always to find also Russians that they were living in France then to find money. But I think one of the way why they lost money, because it was not about making money, it was about, or about even somehow it was about spending, creating art. That was the idea of that whole Gesamtkunstwerk. Let's create a big work of art, let's impact society. A beautiful idea.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're teeing us up perfectly for a reminder of the importance of supporting the arts, right? All right, we have another question. All right, another question in the back.
Yeah, thanks for teeing that up, Jen, because I was about to say, that's a great reminder. Please support Ballet Met and the Columbus Museum of Art. Love y'all. Question for contemporary compositions. How common is it for choreographers to commission the music for, let's say, the contemporary directions work of Ballet Met?
For Ballet Met?
Ballet Met or just in general.
Oh, okay. Well, it happens. Not as often as it used to happen back then. I mean, you have, for example, Twyla Sharp's in the Upper Room. She commissioned that ballet to Philip Glass. That's one of William Forsythe, Tom Williams. A lot of that electronic music was commissioned. So it happens not so often anymore.
Once a season, at least, in our seasons.
Yeah, in our seasons, yeah, we always.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, that's
yes.
it. That's Sue Potter.
Hi, I'm Sue, and I'm the executive director of Ballet Met. And we are very excited that we are bringing choreographers to town who do want to commission music. Edward Liang did that a number of times when he was here, at least once a season, I think. And in last season, Timeless Tides by Ying Yu, that was created by a composer in Amsterdam. So we hope that we're going to be able to continue that tradition. So it does happen. Some wonderful composers working now.
And I love that that's continuing this tradition. The first time we spoke, we talked about Parade. Did some of you see the Picasso exhibition that we hosted a few years ago? And there were these gigantic reproductions of those. And you pointed out to me, which I didn't know because I don't know ballet, yeah, you can really dance in them. And that kind of led to this backlash. And it kind of cracked open my thinking about how these different media intersect in a production like this and how those waves, you know, there are similarities to movements in the visual arts in terms of responding to what has come before and breaking new ground. But I loved how you challenged us to think differently about that. I think we have time for maybe one more question. Oh, yes, all the way in the back. Perfect.
Hi, Maria. One of the things that I was really struck by the inclusion of the ballet in the exhibit was that I'm not used to seeing kind of lesbian content in ballets. Like usually it's very like, oh yes, the man loves the princess. And I was wondering if you just knew any other like little points along the way in ballet history, either before Les Biches or after, that had that same kind of queer lens attached to them.
Sorry, I couldn't understand the beginning. Well, could you repeat?
I was delighted to see that in the exhibit there was a ballet that had lesbian themes
Oh, yeah.
of women loving other women in
Yes.
the dance world, which I think in a lot of ballets is not so common. And I was wondering if there were other
Well,
pieces of dance history that you could point to.
before Levish, no. As I said, Levish is very progressive. Is very far ahead for the time. I think now it's more in contemporary dance. You know, the problem now that we have is that often ballets are much more abstract. So relationships are not being shown very concrete. So sometimes you have two men dancing together. There is a ballet about two men. There is a piece of a ballet from Roland Petit, a ballet that is called Les Intermittences du Cœur, which is about Marcel Proust, the writer, the French writer, which you have a part in one of his books. He touches this theme, and he has two men dancing together. So that ballet was created, I think, in the 1980s. With Maurice Béjart, there's a lot of men dancing together. In Europe, I think in Europe it happens more often, but it has taken a long time. I think now, as I said, there's not a concrete theme often, so you see two men, two women in a relationship, because when always two persons dancing together, there's always something there. But it's up to the eye of the beholder how you interpret it.
If you're interested, the first talk in this series we did was with Maggie Wilson, looking at queer themes in the exhibition and more broadly throughout the history of visual art. It doesn't really talk about ballet, but it is on our YouTube channel if you want to go down a rabbit hole there. And please do check out the exhibition, both for more context about these sapphic intellectual circles and to take another look in light of all of these amazing ideas and histories that Maria has provided us with. With that, I want us to please thank Maria again for her contribution.
Thank you.
And thank you all for coming out.